Yay, everybody, welcome. Happy Friday, July 25th. It's the roundup, the roll call. We've called it so many things, but what we are is we're excited to have Jay, Moni, Michael, Jessica, Colt in the house from the Mac crew. We're welcoming a guest speaker, Dr. Augustine Fu. Sir, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Where do we find you? You're in New York, right?
I'm in New York. Yeah, Midtown, New York.
Okay. I know Augustine for 8 years ago. I was running a legal marketing podcast and I came across ad fraud and I was like, this sounds like something the legal industry should look into, especially in the legal marketing space. And so I had him on a podcast and he blew my mind. And 8 years have gone by. I've spoken to him in three different iterations of getting this topic of ad fraud, sort of his specialty and focus. But I just want to start, Augustine, give us a background of where you're coming from, including your education and like all of those things that kind of make the picture of your services break up into Fu Analytics, and then just sort of give us an
Sure.
introduction.
I'll keep it pretty brief.
Yeah.
But I finished my PhD at MIT in material science and chemical engineering. So nothing to do with what I do today. But I would basically say it's the scientific method in looking at data. So after MIT, I came to New York and joined McKinsey and Company. And right at that time, this was mid 90s, right? 95, 96 is when the internet was just bubbling up, spilling out of military and academia into public. And I just decided I better leave McKinsey and kind of get into the trenches of the internet, so to speak, not be a spectator to it. So I left McKinsey in early 96 and got into what is now known as Silicon Alley, right, as opposed to Silicon Valley. And New York is very advertising centric. So a lot of the tech that came out of New York is marketing, ad tech related.
Hmm.
So I've been in the industry since the very beginning, and I've also done stints at on the client side at American Express, and on the agency side at both IPG and Omnicom. And my last role at Omnicom was chief digital officer of a group of 8 agencies that serve primarily pharma, medical device, and healthcare clients. And that was kind of what led me into the ad fraud side of things, because when
Mm.
we're looking at the campaigns for those pharma clients, we're seeing just absolutely absurd things like 200% click-through rates. And if you average it out, it's like, oh, 15% click-through rates on campaigns. And then people are saying, wow, our campaigns are performing really well. But if you actually, peel that back a little bit, it's like, oh, when you look at some of these sites, they're generating 100%, 200% click-through rates on the ads. And I don't know of any humans that actually go back to an ad and click it again, right? So all of those just didn't make any sense. Long story short, right? Fast forward 15 years, we now know it's all bot activity, and it's basically trivial for the bots to not only load the ads just by loading the web pages, but also click on the ads and then fake the mouse movements and all sorts of bad stuff. But the bad guys, you can imagine they've evolved over the years and the fraud has gotten more sophisticated. And I think, we can cover, what ad fraud is and also
Mm.
how they generate the ad impressions and clicks. But a topic that I've been focused on very recently in the last couple of years is attribution fraud, where they have to take credit for the sales that actually occurred.
Mm.
Because if you're running a whole bunch of ads and you're getting some clicks, but you're not actually getting any sales, the advertisers will get skeptical and say, well, it's not worth spending that much money in there. So the bad guys also have to make it look like it's performing, right? So in your brief, we talked about performance marketers and how do they trick the reporting to make the performance look really, really good to then
Mm-hmm.
convince the marketers to keep spending more in digital.
Mm. Mm.
So that might be a good topic.
I really love that. And it got me thinking, oh my gosh. And if you look into the science of attribution itself, just on its just on the paper, it's already sort of a little iffy. And then so
Yes,
saying that you're going to fraud somebody on some kind of iffy stuff is just like, well, that's weird. But
it's
anyway,
almost made for that. It's like
it's
it's so
almost
convenient for the bad guys. Yeah,
that's very
we should make it
interesting.
more inconvenient for them. But just
Right.
on that topic, let me kind of explain how attribution is flawed and how it's being gamed.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've all heard of view-through conversions, right? So VTC for short. Years and years ago, the people running display ads would say, "Oh, it's so unfair for Google to claim all the credit for the sales using their search," right? So humans' habits would be if you see something on TV or you hear about something, you're probably going to Google the item, right? You're going to do a little research before you buy it. So you end up clicking a search result and then buying it, right? So then the search result is the last click. And so the search gets the credit for the sale. So then when all these ad tech companies wanted to sell display ads, they said, "Oh, it's so unfair that search gets all the credit." So they created this method called view through conversions that said, if someone saw the display ad but didn't click on it, we should still give the display ad some credit for driving that sale or helping to drive that sale. So at least in theory, that sounded really good on paper. What's happened is that basically, when the device is exposed, so when you show an ad on a device, there's a cookie that's set or your device identifier is recorded. So that device is marked as exposed. So then there's something called a view through conversion window, right? 30, 60, or 90 days. If any conversion happened in that window of time, you would basically attribute it, right, or give credit to that display ad.
Mm.
But as we all know, right, as marketers, we know that a single display ad could not have caused or did not cause a sale, right? It contributed to it, but that's kind of the flaw of the model, right? It's too simplistic. It gives the entire credit for the sale to the display ad. So now the bad guys are easily gaming that because now if they can cause many, many millions of devices to be marked as exposed, then whenever any of those devices convert, they get to claim credit for it. Now, there's a very subtle but important point here. When I talk about ad fraud before, a lot of that is just bots loading the ad impressions because they get paid for the tonnage, right? However many ad impressions gets loaded. But when it comes to attribution fraud, it's not so much about bots because you do need humans who actually buy stuff, right? Bots don't buy stuff for the most part. They can, right? They can buy up all of Taylor Swift's tickets so that the scalpers can, scalp the tickets,
Mm.
later. So they can do that, but only when they get paid to. But for the most part, in ad fraud, the bots are just loading the ad impressions, clicking on it, right? Doing the CPC fraud where they're getting paid for the click-throughs. Attribution fraud is different. It has to involve humans because we have to see the actual sales. So the
Mm.
game of that, the fraud and attribution is really about taking credit for sales that had already occurred, right? So they're just gaming the attribution reporting to say, whoa, our ads drove this many sales when the ads didn't actually drive the sales, right? The sales and the conversions already occurred. Does that make sense?
So yes, it does. And so I think we're sort of like, I don't want to get too technical, but I think this
Sure.
isn't even a technical problem. The way you just
Yeah.
described it is the fact that I have to see the metrics and I have to think a thing. And
Yeah.
then that's all it takes. And
That's all
so
it takes.
I think fraud is a bit of a misnomer here and it's being mislabeled because we're thinking of like this, I'm about to get frauded upon when the fraud lives in our eyes and in the way we think about what we're seeing. Is that a fair
Well,
assumption or?
no, there actually is fraud here because there
Well, no,
are
no, no, no,
ad
no.
tech vendors. Yeah.
Along with the actual fraud, but you know what I mean. But do you see what I'm saying? Like it sort of passes muster because we don't know what muster looks like.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's also the problem of marketers seeing what they want to see, right? So if the ROAS reporting says you're getting so much ROAS, right? They're so happy, right? They don't want to hear anything else. They already reported that to their bosses. So it's like they're not going to go back and say that, oh, whoops, the ROAS was overestimated significantly and
No one's gonna.
deliberately and
No one.
fraudulently.
Oh, no
Hey,
one's gonna.
I have a
Yeah, let's
question.
pause and open it up. I want other
Yeah,
people
Let me
to.
yeah,
let me ask a question. What's in it for you to be such a naysayer and such a calling all this stuff out? Like this is I'm asking this a little sarcastically because we're
of
doing the
course.
same thing. And we're sort of calling BS on a lot of things in this world. But like Jake and I were talking this morning, and I worked at MasterCard at one point, and let's say that it was in my interest as a marketing director to you know show a campaign and how successful it was, And keep in mind, this is a brand building campaign too, not a conversion campaign.
Yeah.
Right.
So what is the incentive for me as a marketer, or you as a practitioner, or us as the Marketing Accountability Council to address this really significant problem?
It's really because the numbers and the metrics you see are so overinflated and the prices are so artificially depressed that it's not in line with reality. So that's why I'm saying it's not sustainable. So for a good marketer, you actually have to deal with real marketing, right? Showing ads to real people, actually tracking the sales and conversions that actually did occur. And even in branding campaigns, it's like, did we actually drive awareness? If you showed ads to bots, you didn't drive any awareness, right? So, and then that even gets into the survey fraud, right? So I was talking to a company yesterday that does consumer surveys, right, to say, did this campaign do brand lift and lift awareness, all that kind of stuff. 80% of the survey responses were done by bots. Okay, those were not real. So, like, there's an
Were they
entire
good? Hold
ecosystem.
on. I hate to
Yeah.
interject, but were they good responses from the
Yes.
robots?
Like, wow, it's
Of course they
awesome. Your campaign did awesome. We remember the ad. We remembered everything about the ad.
Yeah.
So all of it was just falsified. But that's the world I come from because I can see it in the data when other people are just not um, suspicious enough, right? They don't question the data that they're getting from the vendors that they're buying from.
So I
And
have,
we rely on some vendors to do the right thing, but not everyone's going to do the right thing.
I have a question, Augustine.
Yeah.
I mean, the conversations that I've had or been involved in today around this topic are kind of mind blowing, and what you're saying just confirms everything that I've suspected and being validated for me today in other conversations I've had. But I'm a little bit confused, or not a little bit, a lot of bit confused when you say bad actors. Who are they, and what enables them to be able to act badly?
Good question.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me that question, say, who are the bad guys, right? Are they hackers? Are they people from, India, China, trying to rip off advertisers? It probably started that way, right? We used to think bots came from Russia and China and all that kind of stuff. No, bots come from Ashburn, Virginia, because that's where the biggest Amazon Web Services data center is, right? So
Wow.
bots come from the USA, and it's trivial because now, most of the bots are just very simple headless browsers that can do a bunch of stuff, right? They can basically do whatever a human can do in a browser. It's just done in an automated fashion.
So are
So it's
the
highly
so are
scalable.
the are the bad actors creating content sites that they control? Is that
Yes.
serve up
So
ads?
let me kind of play through the basics of ad fraud. Right. So when programmatic advertising came along, this was like 2012, 2013 timeframe, it basically separated the ad buyer, meaning the advertiser, from the ad seller, namely the publisher. So in years prior to that, you would sit across the table from ESPN or Hearst or Condé Nast and buy ads from them, right? From people you could actually see. But when you started buying ads through programmatic exchanges, you lost sight of who the heck was selling the ads. And because of the exchanges, and remember the AppNexus story where 92% of their impressions were fake. And even they could tell. So they had to purge it because they would die and go away. So it was a desperate situation for them. So AppNexus, being the first and largest at the time, let everybody in. Okay, so that means all these fake websites. And at the time, WordPress was very popular. So bad guys could basically create 10,000 WordPress sites overnight because it was trivial. It was just a template, right? And you could just copy and paste some code onto the site to run ads. And every ad impression got bid out and so on and so forth. But a fake site had no humans because humans didn't even know they exist. So then the fake sites have to get traffic somehow, and that's where the bots came in. Now, there doesn't need to be a lot of people making bots. Just think of the botnets as already existing, right? So in years past, you've heard of DDoS, right? Distributed denial of service, where they can overwhelm a site with so much traffic that the site fails. Okay, that wasn't a very lucrative use of those botnets. You can now use those botnets and point that traffic fire hose to 10,000 websites that paid you for the traffic. And basically, once those bots load the pages, the ad auction goes, and then people bid on it, and so on and so forth. So now the sites needed bot makers, and you're basically renting time on their botnet to then load your web pages, generate the ad inventory to sell. And I was just telling someone yesterday, over the last 15 years, if the laws of supply and demand, just normal supply and demand worked, there was so much demand coming into digital, meaning advertisers moved so many billions of dollars into digital that if the supply were finite, right? If you're dealing with publishers with finite human audiences, the supply stayed pretty, static. If you had that much demand coming in and the supply stayed the same, the prices should have gone up, right? But instead, for the last 15 years, at the macroeconomic level, we saw prices go down, right? For
Which
15
tells
years.
you from like a top-down analysis that there's fraud here.
Correct. Because the bad guys can manufacture as many ad impressions as you want to absorb all of the budget you're willing to spend. And that occurs in things like political and movie marketing, right? So if before the launch of a movie, the entertainment studio would have to spend all their budget to promote the launch of the movie, right? The opening day. Bad guys love that because if you have a timeline to spend all your money, they would generate as many ad impressions as they need to absorb all your budget. Okay. Same thing with political, right? Before election day, you have to spend all your money. They love those scenarios because they can just generate as many impressions to eat up all your budget. Okay. So that's kind of like the basics. That's how ad fraud evolved. And so then came along a cottage industry of the verification vendors. I won't name them, but basically those vendors were, people thought they could rely on them to detect the fraud. But unfortunately, those vendors have been reporting 1% fraud for the last 10 years, in essence, covering up the fraud because they couldn't detect it. So everyone loved those reports because whenever anyone asked, they said, "Oh, well, these guys told me that it was 1%. That's why I kept spending." Right. So conveniently, they were also the scapegoat too, if necessary. Okay. So they covered up the fraud. Fraud has gotten much larger, not smaller, right? And basically every dollar you want to spend in digital has been absorbed, and human
So,
audiences haven't changed that much. Yeah.
so where
My
does this place the advertiser? Does this place them on the side of the bad actors, or does this place them on the side of the victim with the payers? Like, where's the
Yeah,
advertiser
they're the
in this?
wherever.
victims, but a lot of times they don't care. Okay, so over the years when I deal
Mm.
with large marketers, the first reaction that I see, the knee-jerk reaction, is to cover it up and not to do anything about it, right? So when you're a marketer and you spent $60 million, meaning you gave it to your agency to spend for you, and we tell you it's 90% fraud, they're going to do everything they can to not let their bosses hear that. Okay, so over the years, it's been a tough slog because nobody wanted to hear it. And that was the case up till the pandemic, right?
Mm.
Before the pandemic, nobody wanted to rock the boat, right? Everyone wanted to just keep spending, go to con, have champagne on yachts and all that kind of stuff. After the pandemic, which was this external shock,
Mm.
it rocked the boat for everybody. So then after 2020, I started to see an uptick in advertisers saying, "Oh shit, we're gonna get lower budgets next year. We better start looking into where the heck we're spending our money."
Mm.
So after this external shock, more and more people were willing to look. But as you can imagine, the topic of fraud is very scary for a lot of people, right? Especially CMOs that are there for 18 months. Okay, I've got 6 months left on my tenure. I'm certainly not going to open this topic up, and get blamed for wasting all this money, right? So
Right.
advertisers are the victims, but over the years, they've had many mechanisms to cover it up, right? They can look at those verification vendors and say, "Oh, all of them said there's no fraud, so I didn't get ripped off." And for the branding ones, like Jay talked about, right? If it's not a performance campaign, you just want more reach. You just want to know you bought so many ad impressions, you reached so many people, and you think that drove awareness. And there's even the consumer survey vendors that showed you the surveys that said, "Oh yeah, there was brand lift."
Mm.
Okay,
And
but
then there's
all of it
the
feeding the same thing.
the
Yeah,
phenomenon of the marketer. When I was there, like, we worked to establish Domo as the single source of the truth, and we
yeah,
brought in all the data. We sanitized the data from cardholder transactions and from advertisers and census data, whatever it may be. But the reality is that a lot of marketers, when it comes time to do their wrap report, they just create a PowerPoint and say, "Did this look good? I'll highlight that." And you know, and it's the problem that we have as marketers is that in most institutions, at least the ones I've worked at, the people above the marketers really don't even care to see any of that stuff. They just want to see results, right? So the marketer can just make anything up.
Yep. There's no
and they
process for
do.
verification. And they do, yes.
And they do. Jess, you had your hand up. Cole, also, we haven't heard from you. Jess, just give us some.
Howdy.
Hi.
Okay, you're speaking my language. This is very frustrating. And what I think about when you're talking and when I'm working is like, I like to think about the root of the problem, right? So what is, I feel, and I want to hear what you think, is that it's maybe attribution and incentives not like aligning, right? So when these teams are working against each other, or they're siloed, or the CEO doesn't want the bad press, then they'll claim conversions when there's any murky funnel or any opportunistic, they'll jump on, this is good and I'm taking credit for it, right? And then not everyone is going to do like the right thing, because the right thing for people is like to perform against incentives, right? And so when they don't align with like the desired outcomes, and companies hire to improve specific KPIs instead of just like holistically like matching customers and products to sustainably like grow a brand and then revenue. How what do you prescribe?
Well, let me layer on one more problem that I've seen, which is organizational structure. Right. So if the digital department is different from the TV advertising department, is different from the social media marketing department, is different from the analytics department, and they don't really talk to each other, it's really sub-efficient, right? It's not efficient for the marketer, because sometimes, you're spending in one channel, and that channel has every incentive to make it look like it's performing, because they want to get more budget next year, right? If their channel is not performing better than the other guy, they're not going to get as much budget. So everyone has an incentive to really inflate if possible. And the flaws in the attribution models that we talked about earlier make it easy for them to game the system and make it look like they're driving tremendous ROI or return on ad spend. So you're right. I mean, the way I talk about ad fraud is that it's an incentives problem, not a tech problem. So throwing more tech at it is not going to solve it, because a lot of the people, whether it's the marketer or any of the middlemen, right? All the ad exchanges and all the ad tech companies are basically middlemen. They're toll takers. So they make more money when there's more flow through their pipes. So they don't care, right? If there's plausible deniability, right? If they can just hire one of these verification vendors and say, oh, well, they said it's 1% fraud, we didn't know. Okay, it's convenient for them to continue running as much volume through their pipes as possible, right? Literally every single DSP, again, I won't name the names, they're all public companies, whatever. They're relying on this to continue so that they can continue showing growth. So there's no easy answer to solving that, but let me kind of answer your question to say, we can't solve it for the industry. There are too many vested interests that prevent it from being solved, but we can solve it for the marketers that do want it solved. And that's what I've been working on for the last couple of years, which is the marketer has to reach out and say, we actually think there's a problem. Can you tell us what, and can you tell us how to solve it? Those are the ones I can work with, because if the marketer doesn't want it solved, no matter how much data I show them, they're not going to be convinced, because they've already told their bosses this was working so well. They're not going to go back and say, whoops, my data was wrong, right? None of them are going to say that.
I got a question for Moni.
Yeah.
That is related to this. Is one of the heuristics calling bullshit on attribution?
It's one of my personal life missions. It's not a heuristic, but it's something that I've done for 15 years.
It might be a delusion. There's no heuristic. That would be Jake,
okay.
right?
So it's bigger than a heuristic. It's a core, a foundational value principle. So we've talked about on here before about the folly of attribution in a general sense, not just applied to digital marketing. And so I wonder if on the one hand you're able to say the people on top, the management on top of the organization doesn't care about, like Jay was saying, as long as the charts look pretty, they're happy. Then why is anyone concerned about attribution in any form at all, digital or non-digital, period? Because it's like trying to grab a slippery pig. It's like there's so many challenges to doing it. There's so many different places where a sale could be impacted, and so many parties that could be involved in it, that to try to deduce it down to one element is just silly. And that's what's opening up for so much fraud.
Yeah, exactly. It perpetuates the fraud. But let me kind of explain how I've talked to CFOs and CEOs, right? The marketers are going to cover it up because they spent the money and they don't want anyone to find out. And they want it to look really good. But the CEOs care and the CFOs care, because if the digital marketing or any other form of marketing, right? But digital is where this kind of fraud is most rampant. If the marketing is actually not driving any incremental outcomes and they're simply claiming credit for sales or outcomes that had already occurred, then the company is actually invested in the wrong things, right? So I've seen way too many companies overinvest in digital because the reporting makes it look like it's performing. Whereas in TV, okay, you don't have the feedback loop. It's a one-way channel, right? You don't have those reports that make it look like it's performing.
Yep.
So now when you're spending 90% of your budget in digital, trying to target the 1% of people that have bought from you already before, you're not doing enough brand awareness on TV to target the other 99% of people who have never heard of you before. So as a company, you're actually under advertising, right? You could be growing your sales so significantly. You're now way over invested in the 1% in like retargeting, remarketing of those people who would buy from you or had bought from you before. No matter how many more ads you show them, they're not going to buy that much more from you, right? I use this analogy in class. A family can only drink 4 quarts of milk every week. No matter how much advertising the Milk Council does, they're not going to drink a 5th quart just because you showed them more ads. Okay. So there's a significant opportunity for advertisers to reallocate their budget to something that actually drives awareness. For example, TV advertising. It just doesn't have the same kind of reporting as digital has. And the reporting in digital has been falsified to look so good that they think it's working, but it's actually not driving any incremental. So on this topic,
I actually know someone who sells sponsorship for a radio station, and he's telling me that all the businesses that he talks with, they're like, oh, we want to put our money into digital because it's trackable and accountable. And it's like, okay, that may be true, but what is it tracking and what is it accounting for?
Yeah, crap. It's well, fake stuff.
Part of the metaphors that are going through my mind is that we have something that now has a treasure map. I don't need to even look for the treasure now because I have this map. And it's like, well, you're not even really, you ended the quest too early. And I think someone was like, the dashboard, they just slapped a treasure map in front of you and you were like, end the treasure hunt, y'all.
Yeah.
Because I think this map has what we need. So Cole, do you have some thoughts? I mean, like, you're in this space, you've seen this. I saw some nods. But just pause really quick, and then give your thoughts.
Right on. Yeah, thank you for asking. I really appreciate what you're laying out here, Augustine. And as I think about, in my situation, I'm in high ticket B2B. That's just where I've operated for the last 15 years. Very relationship based. When I'm interacting with I guess I'm going to call them advertising channels, but it's really more like I'm interacting with conferences, with webinar hosts, with speed dating event producers, other like private event kind of things. I mean, they're much more human to human. When I'm paying for my advertising outlays, I'm buying MQLs. impressions and clicks aren't as meaningful to me. I have clear pricing on 3 tiers of MQLs, high, medium, and low. And I buy them and they come in because that's what I'm responsible for delivering to the sales team. I could see what you're describing here. It feels like an insufficient horizon of responsibility for the marketing leader. If you're a marketing leader and you've spotted waste, you're my hero, right? Like, hey, come and tell me you're my hero, right? Like, I think if you have a corporate structure where spotting waste gets you beat up, like, get out. If you spotted waste and you didn't do anything about it, get out. But if you spotted waste and now we're pivoting to figure out a different way to approach the market, that's heroic for me. I know the price that I pay for all 3 tiers of MQLs that come in. And as long as the channels that I'm working with can supply those MQLs in those ranges, then I'm in business.
You're totally fine, I think, because you're focused on in-person events. But similarly, when I talk to college marketers, right, they're paying for leads. And basically
Right.
all the form fills are done by bots. So the bots already have complete information on every high schooler. So they fill in their name, address, email address, phone number, their high school mascot, mother's maiden name, everything. They can fill all those in. And then when the university calls them up, they said, I never applied to your university. Okay, so when it's in digital channels, even the leads are, when you pay on a cost per lead basis, the bots will fake the leads, right? So
That
all of
happened to
that.
me. I
Yeah.
just got a call last
Yeah.
week from someone saying, you're interested in this university? Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about enrollment. I was like, I don't think I am. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I have your name and your number. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
I didn't.
No.
What?
Out of curiosity, the Mac website gets comments like crazy for articles that were published years and years ago. Like, we haven't published an article, but we publish everything on Substack. There's like 5 articles on there, and every day I'm getting 3, 4, 5 garbage comments. What is the reason or incentive for anyone to do that? There's nothing.
Not at all.
Nothing for me.
They're just letting their AI bots train, and they're just playing with you. I mean, they're doing it on every website, so it's.
Yes,
I mean,
know.
when
I've seen it
Here.
online.
Here, wait. I have a question. Are they having a shitty marketing accountability, disaccountability council? Like, is there a bizarro version of us where they're like, how shitty are your MQLs and how fuckety are you like making your sloppy sites? And they're like, bro. And then they have conventions, like shitty conventions where they're like, my click rates are so shitty. And they're like, they need to be shittier. And my data sucks.
There's the
like, is
Direct
there
Marketing Association.
like, honestly, but Augustine, you showed me where these people are chatting and they're like, here's a thing for $300. You can run this script, like, have at it.
Yeah.
Are they trading secrets and they're like enjoying and they're loving it and they're talking about MQLs and they're talking about bringing in more fools and they're having their own revolution, aren't they?
Yeah. Just like Silk Road, right, where the criminals get together and buy and sell illegal drugs. I mean, there's forums where they, basically exchange tips on how to rip off advertisers.
That shit
and they
is
even
whack.
they have GitHub repos where you can actually download the code and do it yourself.
And people are yucking it up in the comments, just being like, man, I'm taking these fools for all they're worth. The sextortion thing to take a hard left, a hard right. Those people are proud of the things that they've made those poor teenage boys do, made them like send them dick pics. And a lot of them have killed themselves and they fucking enjoy it. And that shit is fake as fuck. And I want to shut it all down, but I can't believe it because they're like, follow me for more tips. I can trick these people into sending you dick pics and they're fucking dancing and they're celebrating. And I'm telling you, there's a whole revolution happening.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm not landing this plane. I'm getting off.
You can't land this plane.
I'm jumping off of it.
I think that, for our audience or for the people on this call who are in charge of budgets and campaigns, what do you recommend to companies that are, or agencies that are getting these types of leads, thinking that they are checking a box that, the zip code is right, the area code is right, like this person exists, but why don't they know who I am, and why is my client pissed off because these leads aren't real?
So
let me work against that.
Yeah, let me answer that question with a very short solution. So on my website, I have deliberate open fields, meaning the bots can just fill out the fields. What you need to do is just add a field that's hidden. So a person doesn't see it, but a bot can see it because they're looking at the code. If that field is filled, you know it's not a person because they couldn't have seen it to fill it out anyway. Okay,
A
so you can
honeypot is
basically,
what it's called.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically a honeypot. You can filter 99% of the fake leads just that way. Okay, it's a free solution. Just put a hidden field. Done. Okay. Let me now for this audience, let me tell you two stories and I'll tell you how I help marketers get beyond, this crap that they're doing and seeing in digital. The first is I'm going to use a footfall example. Okay, so years ago, hello, hello.
Sorry, I
Okay,
get
We
sorry.
wanted to
FOMO.
zero it in on you, but now
Yeah,
we
Okay,
just
all right.
skipped you.
I said,
Sorry.
whoa,
Sorry.
everybody
How about
left.
you?
Okay.
Sorry, I
We
need
Um,
you. Oh, wait, oops, someone left.
Oh my God, we like to do this. This is one of our
I had to say,
routines.
sorry,
that's your
It's one of our
thing. Okay.
routines, bro.
Let him
Okay.
go.
To prove that we're human.
Um,
Okay, go.
all right. So years ago, I won't name the companies, but there were location-based vendors that basically promised the advertisers, you don't have to pay us for the ad impressions. You don't have to pay us for the clicks. You just pay us when someone walks into your door, right? So they basically sold their services to Dunkin' Donuts, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, whatever, store chains. Okay. So that's like the ultimate performance, right? You got someone to walk into a store. Okay, but they actually didn't get someone to walk into a store, right? That's what I call footfall. So the way they falsified the attribution is basically there's about 360 million mobile devices in the US. They would basically load ads in the background, a very low cost, 5 cent CPM display ads on all of those devices. So then all mobile devices in the US were marked as exposed. So then when any of those devices walked into the polygon drawn around that Dunkin' Donuts, they can claim credit for it. Okay, I'm just using that as a way to illustrate how even footfall in the physical world can be falsified, not because it actually happened. They're just making the reporting look like they drove the footfall. Okay, that's how they did that. So similarly, now getting back to digital attribution, we talked about view through conversions and then claiming credit for sales that happen in the 30, 60, 90-day window after the ad exposure. It's exactly the same thing. What the ad tech vendors are doing is they're basically exposing all the devices using hidden ads. So the person doesn't ever see the ad. They didn't actually click through on the ad to go to the, vendors to go to the advertiser's website, but their device was marked as exposed. So all the attribution reporting, whether it's DoubleClick or Facebook's, attribution reporting, will say, oh, these are exposed devices. So if a sale happened any, 30, 60, 90 days after, we're going to give credit for that sale to that ad exposure, right? That's how, in the most basic way, the attribution fraud is happening. Now, it is fraud; it's not accidental. Okay, so the best way, so I'll talk about how we helped a hotel chain figure that out and what they did to solve it. Okay, so the first thing was when we talked to them, this is all fraud. They said, "Oh no, it can't be because we're getting so incredible ROAS. We're about to take all of our digital budget out of search, out of social, and just give it to this one vendor because the ROAS was so awesome. We would never want to turn it off." I said, "Okay, well, hang on a second. If you put my tag, a Foo Analytics tag, on your site, and you don't see the traffic occurring, right? Because the ad tech vendor was basically falsifying the Google Analytics to make it look like there was a lot of traffic and clicks. I said, first step is put Foo Analytics on your site to see if you're actually getting the traffic that your vendor is telling you got. Okay. And they said, and then they did that for a week. We said, okay, all the clicks that this vendor is telling you got didn't even occur. So if this was a hotel chain. So if a person didn't click through to your website, they could not have made a booking on your site. So then they realized, okay, that kind of makes sense. So that traffic didn't actually occur. They were simply falsifying our Google Analytics. So then they took the next step, which is let's pause the campaign with this vendor. They're called a performance TV vendor, a performance CTV vendor. So they paused the campaign. Okay, the bookings continued. So then they realized, okay, those bookings that we got were not driven by that campaign from that vendor. So then they just basically pulled budget. That's how they solved it. Okay. Most marketers are too afraid to pause spending because now it goes back to the incentive. A lot of marketers, a lot of advertisers they're gold on spending it all, right? Did you spend the budget in full? That's usually the question they ask the agency. Did you spend it in full? When we find waste, it is terribly inconvenient because, say, for example, 50% of the stuff was wasted. We showed them. They don't want to hear that because that means they have to go figure out a way to spend that wasted 50%. They're perfectly happy with the media plan that the agency gave them at the beginning of the year that says they're going to spend it in full. And there's even been cases that I've observed at the end of the year in December. They call up the agency frantically. Okay, we haven't spent the last $100,000. Can you just figure out something to spend it on? And that's because they are gold on spending it all, not on the actual outcomes that it drove. That's why it's all effed up.
It
But
feels like a.
Augustine,
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Moni.
so how much of this is kind of to Michael's point a little bit, maybe even to Jake's point earlier of like, do we need to blow up these concepts? Is attribution even worthy of a thing to try to track? How much of this digital funnel and ROAS and ROI is just complete nonsense versus we're just doing it right? There's a better way. Is it
Yeah.
nonsense or are we just doing it wrong?
Let me put it this way. I would basically assume it's incorrect first and until it's proven correct, right? Because
Mm.
there's so many flaws in the way it's been used and the vendors have every incentive to trick it. The advertisers should basically assume that those ROAS models and ROI models, because it's coming from the vendor, right? You should assume it's falsified. You should assume it's wrong until you have a way to prove it correct. And the best way to do that is to run those turn off experiments.
Mm.
So this goes all the way back to 2013 when eBay basically turned off the entire West Coast. So they didn't turn off the entire country, right? So they were buying a lot of these search ads that had guitar on eBay or something. All of those clicks were from people who would have clicked through or searched on Google search for guitars on eBay. They would have clicked through anyway. So by just putting a paid ad there, they were basically seeing, tremendous results because people were going to click on it and that ad, the search ad happened to be the first result. So when they turned it off, they saw no dip in the traffic. People kept coming, they kept searching for the same stuff. So that was when they realized, okay, all of that was just duplicative spending, right? We didn't have to spend it. People were going to come via the organic search result anyway.
Because I
But
hate
those kinds of
online
experiments are just not run very often. Yeah.
because I hate online advertising, I purposely avoid any sponsored link and I go
Yeah.
to the real one for the
Yeah.
real website link when I can.
That's a real search.
Most consumers can't even tell. And there was this whole debate about
Oh, yeah,
whether Google
right.
properly labeled, right? Because
Remember
years
that?
ago, they would actually make it a little bit blue, light shade of blue to differentiate the sponsored stuff from and then they did away with that. And then you had to add so all these people, consumer advocacy groups were trying to get Google to disclose which are an ad. But if you're looking quickly on your mobile device, you're not going to see that it's labeled sponsored, right? Most consumers don't pay attention to that. So they'll end up clicking on that first result anyway, right? Whether it's a paid ad or not.
So I have one more question.
Mhm.
Talking about the attribution issue, and we're talking about how this never applied to TV ads. I mean, I don't know. I don't have really any frame of reference to be able to say if things were, if the efficacy of marketing or advertising spending was stronger when there wasn't digital. But I'm wondering,
Mm.
has there been anyone that has done any studies to compare what the measurements for success were sort of pre-digital and now to see like I think you'd be able to tell from a relative basis like was the old model better or is the new model better? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can tell you anecdotally that, TV worked, right? Obviously TV worked, but you just didn't have the digital metrics to then, track it, report it, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people, like we said earlier on this call, they like the reporting. They like the
Mm.
fact that you can report on every single ad impression and they assume that it's, digital when it first started, it was like the right ad to the right person at the right time. People bought into that hope. But in reality, it's all falsified data that makes it look like you drove all these sales when the digital ad had nothing to do with the sale. It was actually TV that drove it, right? But now digital is claiming credit for it as well. So it's not just within the digital channel, it's across channels where digital is claiming credit for awareness like a TV ad that actually drove the sale.
I have an
Yes, Jake.
anecdotal. Thank you. I have an anecdotal story. I assumed a position at a law firm, and they were huge into TV. They $2 million spending. So they were like big on TV, and I came in and I was thinking that digital was the truth because that's what I was like. You know, I'm new. I'm a new little young blood, and I was like, this is it. They're wasting a whole bunch of money. And then I remember the person who was the marketing director at the time was always really tough with the links. He was like, I don't believe that. Why do we have to pay for branded search? That makes no sense. And I was like, oh man, like you're out of touch, bro. And he was like, he would look at links and he would not trust them right on the front. And and I was like, you're kind of slowing things down. But I was an idiot. And so I just think it's kind of interesting that I'm just coming to this grip that I was like, that guy who wasn't good for other reasons, but he said a couple things that I thought he was so out of touch. He was so right about that. And I love that he would just look at things. I don't trust that. These impressions, I don't believe that.
That's good.
What do you
I mean,
mean?
every
I don't believe
marketer should be that skeptical, right? And I wrote an article, I used the Cape Cod chips example. So if a person is searching for Cape Cod chips, you don't need to buy that branded ad because he already knows your brand. He's searching on it. So same thing with that law firm, right? If they're searching on your name.
Oh boy.
Now, if you're searching on like noise canceling headphones, that's not a branded search term. You
That's
do need to
different,
buy
right.
that. But if you're searching for Sony noise canceling, if you have organic results, you don't need to pay for that, right? So those are lots of forms of waste that you can get rid of. But let me kind of go back to your earlier point. If you think about humans' habits, right? So I've taught this in digital marketing class. If you see an ad on Super Bowl, you're probably not just going to go out and buy that thing right away. As most humans, they're probably going to go Google for a little bit more information to inform their own purchase decision, right? And the bigger ticket the item, the more research they're going to tend to do, right? They're probably not going to research a super soda or something, but the next default action is to actually go online and Google it. So what we've done in the past is if you're running TV ads, you can use digital as a feedback loop because you can actually see if there was search volume lift after you ran the TV ad.
Yep.
You can also split it by geography, right? If you ran that TV ad in the Southwest or Southeast, you should see lift in search volume from those states. So it becomes a feedback loop, whereas TV is just a one-way channel, right? It's hard to measure the impact of it. But because of the default human habits of going online to search, you can actually use search volume to gauge the success of that. And over time, you can also use relative search volume to even uh, approximate market share. So for years or years ago, I would say, look at Coca-Cola, look at Pepsi, look at Dr. Pepper. Their share volume, their share of search volume actually mirrored their market relative market volume as well. So all of that because people Google things, right? And so that becomes a signal that you can use to gauge the success of offline stuff like TV and print and radio.
Well, then we can't get you off AI. Now AI is here. It was just you just bringing that up. And I was like, well, they're not searching anymore, Augustine. They're in the future. Their agents are whatever.
Yeah.
So just speak maybe towards that moment where people are saying old marketing's dead, goodbye. And we just discovered why it really wasn't there anyway. Talk about AI real quick.
I think AI just opens up more cans of worms in this. Not only, I mean, to me, the AI agents are not terribly new because years and years ago, the bots were already loading web pages and faking mouse movements and clicking on stuff. So to me, the agents doing that same thing is really not new. But the agents, the AI stuff is actually making it easier for the bad guys to do even more scale than they had before. Because now
Like,
instead of
create more
plagiarizing
AI
content,
swap sites.
yeah, more slop. Yeah. So previously they had to plagiarize the content from news sites, sports sites, and whatever, Getty images. Now the AI can just generate it, right? So they don't even have to take the time to go scrape and steal the content to put on their fake WordPress sites. Okay, so that's how the velocity of fraud is even higher now with AI. And then all these ad tech companies that say, oh, we're going to use AI to try to find the fraud. Okay, it's basically algo versus algo. If you can't train or you don't know what to look for, you're definitely not going to be able to find the bots. if you're going to train the AI fraud detection algos on something, they'll be able to look for the fraud that we've seen before. They're not going to be able to see the fraud that's coming or that hasn't been seen in the training data before, right?
Mm.
So all of that kind of stuff is just because of people's lack of real understanding of AI. To me, it's a nice, cool, useful tool, but it's not going to solve many of the problems that people are making it out to be able to solve.
Amen. Amen. Okay, final thoughts from the audience. We got 4 minutes with final thoughts for Dr. Augustine before we put him back on a plane. I don't know.
The only marketing medium we haven't talked about is event marketing, live experience marketing. So just from your perspective, Augustine, what is your perception of how marketers view that in their marketing mix? Do they see it as like it's not that valuable because we talk about digital and TV and other forms of media, but that seems to be the redheaded
Yeah,
stepchild.
I think it depends heavily on the nature of the product, right? So if it's a B2B product and it's a longer sales cycle, it's a much bigger ticket item, those are invaluable, right? You really have to go talk to the person so they can understand what your product is. I do think that there's going to be the pendulum is going to swing back this way, which is like the marketer's going to use more in-person events. Kind of like going back to CES and going back to those kind of things because people are now getting sucked into AI. I mean, they're even having relationships with their AI avatars. Okay, so that's not healthy. And at some point,
Oh,
people are going to
I was
like,
about to
oh
say
shit.
Mazel Tov. Sorry.
Yeah, they're gonna wake up and say, okay, I need some real human interaction. So I think
Right.
there's gonna be a resurgence of events and people getting back to talking to people in real life.
Hell yeah, let's do it. Oh, you got to follow Augustine because he is an amazing chef. He makes the most amazing food and he
Thank you.
takes these dope pictures and he just loves to talk about food. And I talked to him. I was like, Have you heard the bad news? And he was like, check out these pork chops. So he's just such a great,
I'm on
balanced
Instagram.
person.
Yeah, Instagram is where I put all my food pictures.
Very balanced
All right.
person.
Thanks,
So
Jay.
anyway, final thoughts. Anybody? That's it. We're feeling good, man. Thank you so much, Augustine.
Thank you. Thanks for
joining
having
us.
me. Great chatting with y'all.
Dude.
Thank you for sharing your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank
Really
you.
fun. Doomsday, but it is hopeful.
Right.
Yes, it is hopeful. There is a way to do it.
We will get together in person one day as we're all like
Yes.
coming in and out of focus on our little screens.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Okay.